You know what? Since we're getting close to Christmas, why don't we talk about the Star of Bethlehem? Why don't
Yeah,
we
okay.
talk about what
Ooh.
what that would mean?
Sure.
I'm saying in my books and in my lectures that that this was probably a craft, and I'm supporting that by the mere fact that we're being told that it's almost like in Exodus, the pillar of cloud by day, the pillar of fire by night. It's at least unidentified. It is moving. It's intelligent. It feeds the Hebrew tribe, this ragtag bunch of folks when they flee. So there's some type of agency. And also with the Star of Bethlehem, because we know that stars don't travel across the sky. They don't shine light down. And what intrigues me is all of it intrigues me. But what really intrigues me is the wise men, because yes, they're coming from the east. And some people had said they may have been Zoroastrian, and then all this is probably true. But the whole ritual reminds me of what the Buddhists do when they think a new Dalai Lama or a special child is being conceived. They consult the astronomers and astrologers. And so these people saw that there was a special birth, that something special was happening in Palestine at the time, and they come.
Right. And that's interesting that you mentioned the Dalai Lama, because that tradition is still happening. We currently have, what is he, the 13th Dalai Lama?
Yes.
Go ahead, Ken. I'm sorry.
No.
I was going to say there's something, before we get too far in here, there's something else that always intrigued me about that star that I think supports what Michael was saying. I was always wondering about this. It's, we always picture the star over leading the wise men to Bethlehem. It didn't lead them to Bethlehem. The star was not omniscient. It led them to the capital. It led them to Jerusalem. And then they said, where is he who was born king of the Jews? And then Herod had to consult his wise men who went to the text. And they determined from reading the old texts that Bethlehem was the place. Then the star went ahead and led them to Bethlehem, according to the story. So whether the story actually happened, I find it very intriguing. If this was something like the Shekinah glory of God or God's special place, why didn't the Almighty and the All-Knowing lead right to where the baby was born? Why'd they have to go to the capital city, to the arch enemy of Jesus? And from there, they had to consult the texts, the old ancient texts. That's awful strange story to me.
Why wasn't Gabriel keeping track of where his girlfriends were going?
And maybe they wanted Herod to know.
Yeah. Well,
maybe, but who knows? But it's because there's so many holes in the story. But just the mere fact that this was a crap, because I feel that, and I don't know, the monotheistic religions, to my mind, definitely have the possibility of extraterrestrial influence. Now, were these folk in the craft, were they conscious about trying to start a religion? I really don't think so, but they're heavily mentioned in these monotheistic religions. Not limited to them, but
to play the devil's advocate here too, we have to at least leave this open that every second Tuesday, I'm not even sure there was ever an historical Jesus in the first place, that it wasn't Paul's whole idea. And we also have to leave open the fact that this could have been just a story that was concocted to, illuminate some Old Testament texts. My problem with those, and sometimes I go along with that, my problem with that is there's so much detail in it. It seems like it's based on something to me. Something happened. Now, it may have been misunderstood, and it may have been misinterpreted, and it may have changed down over the years too, but it sure seems like something happened. And I think we have to at least leave open for what Michael was saying about the possibility of an extraterrestrial event going on.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, Josephus mentions Jesus, and he even has this. I should have brought it out with me, the writing. He says, he refers to him as a man, but then he says in the next sentence, if one could call him a man.
Yes, that's right.
And so what you're saying, Jim, you know, and I love it. You know, whatever happened to these fishermen or whoever they were, they went from being, this transformation happens, and all of a sudden these people are willing to stand in front of Roman emperors and say, do what you got to do. You do you, and I'm going to do me. And I'm paraphrasing, you know, and they're willing to go to the lion's den. And they will, something happened after these people either met Yeshua or read about him or knew people that knew him. It was like, which was the threat to the empire. You know, you know, these folks had nothing to lose. So something extraordinary happened.
Yeah, and we see that all through the Bible. The Bible is story after story of transformational experience of some kind, and a lot of times there is, you know, there's indications of what type of experience that was. A lot of times there isn't, but when we look at them all in as a group, there seems to be a lot of similarities between all of these experiences. And if you count the Star of Bethlehem as one of those, this long chain of experiences, it fits the bill in terms of a lot of the other things that we've seen throughout the entire Bible leading up to that point, and even through the New Testament as well. It continues where there are things happening, where something comes down from the sky, and there are usually lights involved. Sometimes there's thunderous noises, which we do have as well in this angelic, you know, the Annunciation and the shepherds abiding in the fields, and they're sore afraid. Why are they afraid? Because something showed up in the sky making a lot of noise. They talk about trumpets and you know, loud singing and all this, as if all the angels were singing and praising God, but that's got to be pretty loud. So I wonder what they're actually hearing, right? Like, you know,
in all of the great world religions, there's always a series of events that happens to the founder. The founder always seems to undergo a kind of a shamanic experience. Moses, of course, at the burning bush, out in the wilderness. Jesus going out into the wilderness to confront the devil. Buddha sitting under the bow tree and confronting, you know, the Buddhist equivalent, Mara, the equivalent of the devil. Muhammad going out to the cave where he meets the angelic Gabriel, who says write, and writes the Quran. You know, of all the world religions, the only one that doesn't feature one of these is Hinduism. And the only reason Hinduism doesn't feature it is because there are so many different families of religions in Hinduism, and they all seem to have something happening at the beginning. It always seems to be some kind of
something there, Jim?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Because in Hinduism, we do find, maybe it's a little bit of a different flavor, but there's still a lot of stories within the Vedic texts and whatnot. The Bhagavad, I can't say it right.
Bhagavad Gita,
Bhagavad Gita,
Bhagavad Gita. You know, all of these very ancient texts which predate most of the Hebrew texts, and they're back to this probably around the same time period as the Sumerian literature. And they also basically, they're all in agreement. And the Bhagavad Gita and the some of the Vedic texts also speak of it's a little bit of a different bent. They have the Vimanas, they have these battles with rockets flying around and giant explosions in the sky and destroying cities.
It all seems to come together at the beginning of the religion, in the experience of the first, either the founder or the founders. And then it's afterwards in the centuries that follow where the followers put up all these walls and dogmas and doctrines and everything else. So the
Right.
religions we have today is really a shell that is based around that experience of the founder. And so many times the people who worship within a particular a shell, whether it's Christianity or Judaism or whatever, they don't have that initial experience with the holy, with the sacred, with the divine. And so it
Yeah.
just becomes a rote thing.
Yeah, and they're coming up against things that they simply can't believe for whatever reason. And so really
I find the words of Jesus interesting here when he accused even the Jews of his time of being like whitewashed tombs, but you're full of dead men's bones inside.
Yeah.
That could be said about a lot of religions nowadays, I'm afraid.
You know, the thing is too, I think the universality of the story, I give you an example. As both of you know, I'm a Unitarian Universalist clergy person. And on my church, we have atheists, pagans, they're all there on Sunday. It's beautiful, but it's the challenge of trying to get something to try and reach everybody. And of course, you can't always. The point I'm trying to make is and I've served UU Christian churches strictly as well. This is not one of those churches, but on Easter and on Christmas Eve, that church is packed. What am I getting at? Yeah. The universality of that story is like the hero or shero's journey. A child is born. The old order is threatened. Whether it's family, whether it's society, this child is told that he or she is one way, but as they walk their journey, they find out that's not really who I am at all. And as they discover themselves, as they discover their oneness or their interconnectedness, the old order is threatened. Something needs to be done about this individual. And then there's this kind of rebirth. And I just look and I tell my congregation, I say, I know some of you, I'm going to see you next Thursday, and I won't see you again until April for Easter. But atheists, don't know, don't care, UU Christian, they come because in the West, at least, and I'm a Western person, I'm educated in the West, there's something about that child, that baby, that narrative that touches you no matter what your theological background is.
Right. So do you think then that is like something within our own psyche where we are personally identifying with that feeling of that baby going, hey, something's weird, like that, like you just said, you've been told a certain thing and then you find out that it wasn't, like you're something else. And
there's something, but that's the journey that we all take.
Yeah.
I don't care whether you're Hindu, I don't care whether you're Louis Farrakhan, I don't care who you are, you come into the world. And basically your life is kind of unlearning what you've learned as you find out, hey, I'm not like this at all. But and you're being told, hey, turn that down a bit, walk that down, that's uncomfortable, don't do that.
Right.
And that's the journey, whether you're religious or not, is the journey between the dashes, from birth until death. What do I do between the dashes? And I think that's the universality, whether you're a baby born in Kandahar, Harlem, Ontario, Virginia, there's the sacredness of the child because that always represents new life and the journey they're going to have to take. And of course, in Jesus's life, that he led a committed life, committed unto death, if you will. But we all have that hero's journey, that shero's journey that we have to take. And that baby represents that, even when you strip away all the theology. Maybe I don't believe in saviors, or but there's the journey or the trajectory of the life of this child is what gives life reverence. Because whether you believe what I say, we all know what it's like to be born and to try to find our way and who am I and why am I here and what's my connection, to all this, all that is, and my connection to the planet. It's like the cross. It's the vertical and the horizontal. What's my relationship to that? And
Right.
that scares people.
Yeah.
And you're gonna cause some people to get a little anxious when you start saying, "Boy, I'm a powerful person. I found something in life I'm committed to."
Yeah.
Yeah.
This,
Anyway,
this,
I'm running on and on, but you
no,
get
no,
my
no, no, no. This ties in as well with something else that I think is important to the story too.
Well, you started it, Jim.
Oh,
Talk
I
about
think
it.
I get a kick out of looking back when UFOs first came big into the psyche of here in the West, in Europe and the
Yeah.
United States. And people started looking for help from on high, saving from on high.
Yes.
It was the exact same time in history when the evangelical Christian church came up with the idea of the rapture, about Jesus coming back and snatching up his followers.
Yes.
It seems as though they were looking for the same thing. They were looking for a savior from outside, either within their religious context or within a scientific context.
Yeah.
But it grabbed us, and I can't help but think that, well, Carl Jung wrote a wonderful book about the psyche of UFOs and what it meant, and that whole collective unconscious.
And the symbol of the disc, and what that means or has meant.
I've written a lot about the Akashic Field being the field of potential and possibility. When it's in the Akashic Field, it's there. People experience it at the same time, all within maybe a different context, but it's the same basic idea. When it's in the Akashic Field, it's kind of like the old Cialis commercial. When it's there and you need it, it's there for you. It's the that kind of thing that everybody experiences it, because I think we're going through a psychological transformation. Maybe the history books in the far future, assuming we can get to the far future, maybe they're all going to say that this was the time when we began to all of a sudden turn outward and interpret that outward hope from that story in a different way.
Yeah, maybe. But I tend to be skeptical about these optimistic ideas, but that's okay.
I know what you mean.
We need to embrace them. But I'm thinking, okay, so there's another element here, and it's sort of just another layer underneath what Michael's saying, and about the concept of the birth, and when you are talking about the psyche and this stuff as well, and like there's this realization that I think many of us, hopefully all of us, will experience at some point in our life, and that is where you look around and just realize that everything is bullshit, and there's got to be something more. And this is something that even the evangelical Christians have attempted to incorporate into their messages. There's got to be more to life, and yeah, for sure, but not necessarily in the way that they're selling. But I think that's definitely something to that, and I wonder if some of the ancient pagan traditions that Christmas is based on are really grappling with those concepts as well. Like when you think about the Yule log, I don't know a lot about the history of the Yule log, but to me, what I see in the symbology there is that there was a tree that was once alive, it's now dead, but yet we burn it, and we're transmutating this corporeal body into this flame, this energy, this aura. So
light in the darkness.
So it's well, very much so, because originally the Yule log was probably the only source of light in the room, if it was inside, or possibly was done outside at night. And like essentially having the experience of a campfire which many of us are familiar with. And I think that kindles something that's very primal and very ancient within us, that we remember that there's something fascinating about fire, but it's also deeper than that, because it's telling us that this physical sense of what you see is only part of the story. And that is when we burn the Yule log, we're transforming this normal, natural state into something magical, I guess, and I think it can be very powerful. And even if just to say, hey, you are that Yule log. So put yourself in the place of the Yule log. You're more than just your body. And what it brings into question what happens when you die. But I think it's more than that. I think it's all kind of about letting go of the normal physicality that we appear to be trapped in. And what if that tree, while alive, could somehow harness that fire power? Well, generally they can't. They have to die before they can do it. But what if?
Yeah. Wow. Look what you just did, Ken.
I made you guys dumbfounded. Well, it won't be the last time. I promise you that.
Well, all of these, the pagan symbols surrounding Christmas, I've always found fascinating. Everybody's favorite season of the year, and most of the symbols that we think of are usually pagan symbols, but they mean the same thing. I think you're absolutely right. The Yule log is certainly right up there with the rest of them.
Yeah, and it's interesting how we just shifted, because I love it, from Christmas to the solstice, which of course predates. The solstice is Wednesday. I mean, next week. Yeah. But what the pagans in my church, a couple of things. That connection to nature, they have not lost it.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of them reject Christianity, because it's very anthropomorphic. The other thing is, and you find this with a lot of Aboriginal cultures, is they can live with mystery.
Yeah. They
can live with, I don't know. That's why I love what the Lakota do, Wonka Tonkin, the Great Spirit. He's the great mystery. And in the West, we don't live with mystery, probably because of our worship of science. We got to figure this out. It's got to be a formula. And it's all, to me, it's science, of course, is changing, obviously. So I want to be cognizant of that, with quantum theory and quantum physics. But basically, science says, I'll believe it when I see it. But faith says, or spirituality says, if you believe, I'll show you. And those are two very fundamentally different ways of looking and living life. I mean, Einstein says that, the most important question, or at least one of them, that we can ask ourselves is the universe a friendly place? Because your answer to that question will precede how you live. And so if you can look at nature and life as a mystery, and you try and coexist with it, there's a flow to life, there's a oneness. If you look at life like, and we've been taught that in Christianity, we are to conquer the earth. The earth is something that we need to control. And we need, and you see where this can cause tension.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to answer that, I mean, is the universe a friendly place? I mean, if it wasn't, we wouldn't be here, because there's a lot of power out there that could very easily destroy us. And yet here we are.
Yeah.
Well, I agree, because I think the way you do. But for someone else, it may not be. But, and quantum physics says you create your own reality. So you and I can live in this world and kind of say, yeah, look at that. Oh, wow. And someone else, maybe their nervous system, hypervigilant. There's disease, there's predators, two-legged, four-legged, and otherwise. There's all this intrigue and stuff. Same world, just different perception.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm really, I don't know whether you two are watching or following it or not, but I'm really following the new NASA telescope that's going up next week.
Right.
Can you imagine the telescope outside the orbit of the moon, looking out in space and being able to look back into space 13.5 billion years ago? I wonder, assuming everything works and we have a chance to look through a telescope and see that time of the universe where let there be light came to pass, when light actually began. I wonder how that's going to affect our theology. I wonder if it will. It'll be fascinating to see how could that change the Christmas story if we're able to look back to the very beginnings of it all. How could that change the story about light in the darkness and the Yule log and all that kind of thing? It's going to be a fascinating time to see what it does to theology. It really is.
Well, light in the darkness is really the kind of the whole thing that's happening in the universe. That's the only thing that's happening in the universe, is that there's light in the darkness. Yeah. There's all these spots of light everywhere, and they are literally fueling everything that's happening.
Yeah. We are stardust, that's for sure. Oh.
So maybe that ties back to the Star of Bethlehem in some way.
Well,
I don't know how.
Well, we're just kind of kicking it, but this is called the season of lights for a reason. Whether it's Diwali in the Hindu religion, we just finished Hanukkah. Kwanzaa's coming up the day after Christmas. Of course, Christmas itself. This is the season of hope and light in the darkness. And I guess Jesus was even explained that way. There's an old Hindu saying, I think it's Hindu or maybe Buddhist, why curse the, don't curse the darkness, be a light. I mean, there's all these memes and metaphors, and we're right here smack dab in the season. We're just unpacking it.
Which is fascinating. Yeah, adds a whole new meaning to that wonderful verse from the Gospel of John. Light has come into the world, but people love darkness rather than light. Light all around us, light within us, but we have to open our eyes to it. That's going to be the secret.
And also going back to Jung, we also have to embrace darkness.
Yeah.
I just did a sermon a couple of weeks ago about don't be afraid of the dark. And when you're in your womb, you're in darkness. You don't want to come out. Yeah. Many of us didn't. Darkness gives us permission to rest, to sleep. I love the yin yang symbol where there's, the black and white circle. There's dark and light, and like in the dark. They knew this way before what our scientists are telling us, that life is both and. It's not either or. And if you just embrace the light and you don't deal with your shadow, Jung tells us, it can get kind of ugly. Right. So this balance of light and dark. I know people who try to go into really the Course in Miracles and really high levels of spirituality, and they haven't dealt with their other stuff, and it just makes it worse. So it's always balance.
It's a cycle, isn't it, Michael? Like you mentioned solstice. Well, solstice happens every year, twice a year, I guess. But if you think about the winter solstice specifically, every year there is a day that's the shortest, where the night seems to rule the day almost in a way. And this has to happen every year. It can't just happen once. It has to happen every year. And personally, I think that also has to happen on an individual level, is that you can't, you're right, you can't just be riding on the mountaintop experience all the time. There's also times where you have to rest, and even God rested. And the cycles of day and night and sleep, I think sleep is super important, and we tend to overlook it. Now you mentioned Jung, and he gets very much into dream interpretation and things like that, which I think maybe that might be another interesting topic to look at. But just really to say that something is happening in your brain, in your mind, in your psyche when you dream, and that something is not the same type of thing that you can deal with or have happen to you or do while you're awake. And those are both important. We can't sleep our life away, but neither can we ignore sleep.
It's interesting too. We were talking about the Star of Bethlehem and this whole idea of inner transformation, Ken, that you were just talking about. Even when we're sleeping, our minds are still going. I mean, a dream and that kind of thing. Isn't it interesting that when we do make the journey, when we do follow the light, when we come to the point where transformation takes place and we give of our gifts, the gold, frankincense, and myrrh, our life has changed. We have to go home by another way. We don't go home the same way we came. The wise men, having been warned in a dream. Oh, there's Jungian, if anything.
Right.
Not to go back to Herod. They went home by another way. They were transformed. Their lives took a different path.
Yeah.
Ideally, that should be happening, I think, to all of us every Christmas. But of course, we lose a lot of that inner transformative stuff of Christmas when it just becomes a fairy tale, when it just becomes a scripture to believe or to swear allegiance to, and it doesn't hit us personally, I think. So that we lose a lot when that happens.